What if one day the people you trusted most turned against you? Your own brothers, the ones who shared your blood, your childhood, your laughter, looked at you not with love, but with envy. What if their jealousy led them to betray you, to strip away your freedom, to sell you like a stranger? Would you still believe that God had a plan? Would you still trust that the pain you felt was leading somewhere greater? There once lived a young man named Joseph, the son of Jacob, in the land of Canaan. He was only 17, full of dreams and favor. His father loved him more than all his other sons, for Joseph had been born to him in his old age. As a sign of his love, Jacob gave him a richly ornamented robe, woven with colors that shimmered like light. But love can become a weapon in the eyes of envy. When Joseph's brothers saw the robe and the way their father looked at him, hatred began to grow. They could not even speak to him in peace. Joseph was a dreamer. One morning he said, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain in the field, when my sheaf rose and stood upright, and your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers scoffed, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And their hatred deepened. Then he dreamed again. "The sun and moon and 11 stars bowed down to me." Even his father rebuked him. "Will your mother and I and your brothers bow to the ground before you?" But Jacob kept the words in his heart, unsure of what they meant. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers as they grazed their flocks near Dothan. When they saw him coming from afar, his robe catching the sun like a banner of pride, they said to one another, "Here comes that dreamer." And before Joseph could greet them, the poison of jealousy turned to a plan. "Let's kill him," one said, "then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." But Reuben, the eldest, tried to intervene. "Don't shed blood. Throw him into this pit in the wilderness, but don't harm him." He planned to rescue him later. When Joseph arrived, they seized him, tore off his robe, the robe that symbolized his father's love, and threw him into an empty pit. As he cried out, the brothers sat down to eat. Then a caravan of Ishmaelite traders approached from Gilead, their camels loaded with spices, balm and myrrh, on their way to Egypt. Judah spoke, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and hide his blood? Come, let's sell him to these Ishmaelites. After all, he is our brother." And for 20 pieces of silver, they sold Joseph into slavery. Reuben returned to the pit and found it empty. In despair, he tore his clothes. The brothers soaked Joseph's robe in goat's blood and took it to their father. Jacob looked at it and wept bitterly. "It is my son's robe. A wild animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." From that day forward, Jacob refused to be comforted. Meanwhile, Joseph was taken to Egypt and sold to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard. Though enslaved, the Lord was with him. Everything Joseph touched prospered. Potiphar saw that Joseph was no ordinary servant and placed him in charge of his entire household. Under Joseph's care, Potiphar's house flourished. But where light shines, darkness stirs. Potiphar's wife looked upon Joseph and desired him. Day after day she tried to seduce him, saying, "Come to bed with me." But Joseph refused. "How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" One day, when none of the servants were inside, she caught him by his cloak. He tore himself free and ran, leaving the cloak behind. In anger and humiliation, she screamed. When Potiphar returned, she showed him the cloak and said, "This Hebrew slave tried to make a fool of me." Potiphar's anger burned, and Joseph was thrown into the dark prison beneath Pharaoh's palace. In the shadows of that prison, where hope often dies, Joseph's faith did not. The Lord was still with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor with the prison warden. Soon Joseph was put in charge of all the prisoners. Among them were Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and baker. One night, both had troubling dreams. When Joseph saw their distress, he said, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer said, "In my dream, I saw a vine with 3 branches. It budded, blossomed, and clusters of ripe grapes grew on it. I took the grapes, pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and placed it in his hand." Joseph replied, "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position." Then the baker spoke, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. Birds were eating from them." Joseph said, "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head." 3 days later, both dreams came true. The cupbearer was restored, and the baker was executed. Before he was released, Joseph pleaded, "Remember me when it goes well with you. Mention me to Pharaoh." But the cupbearer forgot him. 2 years passed in silence. Then Pharaoh himself dreamed 2 dreams that troubled his spirit. In the first, 7 sleek, fat cows came up from the Nile, followed by 7 thin cows that devoured the fat ones. In the second, 7 healthy ears of grain grew on one stalk. Then 7 thin ones, scorched by the east wind, swallowed them up. None of Pharaoh's magicians could interpret them. Then the cupbearer remembered, "Today I am reminded of my shortcomings." There was a young Hebrew in prison who interpreted dreams, and what he said came to pass. Pharaoh summoned Joseph. Shaved and dressed in clean robes, Joseph stood before the throne. Pharaoh said, "I have heard you can interpret dreams." Joseph answered, "I cannot, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." Pharaoh told him the dreams, and Joseph replied, "The dreams are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout Egypt, followed by 7 years of severe famine. Let Pharaoh appoint a wise man over the land to store food during the good years." Pharaoh looked at Joseph and said, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" He placed his own signet ring on Joseph's hand, dressed him in fine linen, and set him over all Egypt. From the pit to the palace, Joseph was now second only to Pharaoh. During the years of abundance, Joseph gathered and stored grain in vast quantities. When the famine came, it spread across all lands, even to Canaan. And there Jacob said to his sons, "I have heard there is grain in Egypt. Go down and buy some, so that we may live." When Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed before him, just as in his dreams. But they did not recognize the brother they had sold. Joseph, however, recognized them. His heart trembled, but he concealed his identity. He tested them, spoke harshly, and demanded they bring their youngest brother, Benjamin. When they returned with Benjamin, Joseph could no longer contain himself. He ordered all his servants to leave. Alone with his brothers, he wept so loudly that those outside heard. "I am Joseph," he said. "Is my father still alive?" His brothers were speechless, terrified. But Joseph drew near and said, "Do not be afraid or angry with yourselves for selling me here, for it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." And so Joseph embraced the very ones who betrayed him. He wept on their shoulders and sent for his father. When Jacob saw his son alive, his spirit revived. Joseph provided for them all, and the family of Israel settled in Egypt, where they prospered. Joseph's story is one of divine orchestration. From betrayal to blessing, from pit to palace, every wound was part of a greater plan. God's silence did not mean his absence. In the depths of despair, Joseph was never forgotten. Sometimes what feels like the end is only the turning point. The pain, the waiting, the betrayal, all of it may be the very path to the promise. When life seems unfair, remember Joseph, the boy who was sold, imprisoned, forgotten, and yet chosen to save nations. What others meant for evil, God can still use for good. If you found this story meaningful, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us continue bringing these timeless stories of faith to life.